Bored in Butler County? Need to know where to catch a show this weekend? What events are even happening in the area? I'm Molly Miller, one of the writers behind the Butler Eagles Weekend Entertainment section, and I'm here to banish the boredom from your cold and rainy days. Sign up and receive Miller Minutes, that's my column, and a list of Butler County-based events direct to your inbox every Thursday afternoon by visiting bit.ly/ButlerEagleWE newsletter. That's bit.ly/ButlerEagleWE newsletter. You can also find the latest events under the A&E tab at www.butlereagle.com. Click Weekend Entertainment, or pick up Thursday's print edition of the paper for the latest events. See, there's lots to do in Butler County when you read the Butler Eagles Weekend Entertainment section. Visit bit.ly/ButlerEagleWE newsletter to sign up for the weekly newsletter, so you won't be bored in Butler County again.
Hello, and welcome to this season of Alter Eagle. We are starting season 1 with the topic of addiction in Butler County. Conversations on the physical side of addiction, trauma, the neuroscience, mental health, and stigma surrounding addiction. Experts, resources, and stories from people who have fought addiction head on. I am your host, Laura Krigo. Let's keep the conversation going. Now a word from our sponsor, BetterHelp. For a long time, I suffered with depression and anxiety. I had tried therapy before, but struggled finding a therapist I connected with until I found BetterHelp. That's why I am so excited to share BetterHelp's mission to make therapy more affordable and more accessible, because finding a therapist can be hard, especially when you're limited to the options in your area. BetterHelp is a platform that makes finding a therapist easier because it's online. Remote therapy sessions, and by filling out a few questions, BetterHelp can match you to a professional therapist in as little as a few days. It's easy to sign up and get matched with a therapist. Click the link in description and receive 10% off your first month of BetterHelp. And by clicking that link, you support this channel. Plus, you can easily switch to a new therapist at no additional cost without stressing about insurance, who's in your network, or anything like that. I was struggling for a long time, and BetterHelp was where I found my therapist, Whitney, who I still see weekly for almost 2 years now. So, if you're struggling like I was, consider online therapy with BetterHelp. Click the link in description or go to betterhelp.com/altereagle. That's betterhelp.com/altereagle. There's no better time than now to start your mental health journey. Thank you again, BetterHelp, for supporting this channel. Ooh, it's hot out. It's probably not the first time you've heard that in the last week. It's so hot out, I think I could boil water on my porch and make rice. I don't know why rice. There's lots of things you can make with boiling water. But anyways, back to another episode. Today's episode is such a special one because today's episode features our very own here at the Butler Eagle. She's the beautiful smiling face that you see when you first walk in our front doors, Becky Yount. Just such a beautiful soul, and was something that something that I learned from Becky, I think almost on a daily basis when I speak to her, is just slow down a little bit, right? Take time to talk to people, have a conversation, smile, ask them how they're doing, compliment them. She compliments me all the time. We're always talking about clothes and shoes, and she's just such a beautiful soul. And we sat down today to talk about her book, Love Worth Waiting For. And I have to be honest with you, I have teared up quite a bit reading this book, because a lot of it is very relatable to me in different ways. So the story is about how she met the man of her dreams at the age of 43. They got married, and they were married for 2.5 years. And Matthew, her husband, passed away in his sleep. And to wait that long to find love, to find that person that really just makes you giddy and happy. And she really lived a very, where today is, very untraditional. And maybe that's not even the right word, because to her it was traditional to wait, to hold hands with a man, to kiss a man, to live with a man before marrying him. She shares her journey of dating, and she even shares the story of her first engagement and how that ended. She's just so vulnerable, and what I love most about the book is she gets right into it right away. And it's such a beautiful message that she gives, to where, she would do anything to have Matthew here. Anything. That's not even a question. But because that's not an option, she said, the sun is still shining. There are still so many beautiful things to be grateful for and happy for in this lifetime. And the fact that she had Matthew, that they were together, that they met, that they married, and they had the journey that they had, and they will meet again one day. It's such a beautiful story. But there were a couple times where, I've got to be honest with you. I'm not sure if you're going to pick up on it in the episode, but there's one part in particular where I read from the book, and I had to stop because I'm like, I'm going to start crying. And if I stop crying, I'm not going to be able to stop. Relatable, beautiful, soulful. And she's one of the people here that makes me love being a part of this company, a part of this family legacy, I should say. But I'm just going to get right into it. It's a little bit of a longer episode, but I'll be honest, there were things I didn't want to cut out. I did have to cut a couple sections out, or it would have been much longer. But I want to give her time to really share her story. So here we are with our very own Becky Yount. Today I am sitting down with Becky Yount. We work together here at the Butler Eagle.
Yes, we do.
She's the beautiful face that you see when you walk in the front door. So if you've never been here, you should come and say hello to her.
Definitely.
She's always greeting you with a smile.
I try.
Yeah, you do. So we are sitting down and talking about Becky's book, Love Worth Waiting For, which was something I noticed pretty early on when I started working here. She has it on a little mini easel right behind her desk. So on the very top of the front page, it says, for those hoping to find real love and those who already have.
Yeah.
So one of the things I did want to ask you was, and we talked about this a little bit, but the main reason for you writing this book. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yes. I wish I had written this in the book, but the number one reason was for my 8 nephews and nieces who were young when Matthew passed away. And when we married, the kids ranged in age from 2 to 10, and this was just 2.5 years later. So some of them that lived a distance away aren't going to remember a whole lot about him. And he was, and yes, I'm biased, but he was a pretty phenomenal man. And I would like them to know what kind of a man their uncle was. I know that they all loved him. I know I've heard since from their parents that he was a favorite uncle. And that isn't a surprise to me, but they need to know, I would like them to know what made him tick, what was important to him, what his values were. And I would love for them to know the things that they couldn't possibly know without him being here and without a close connection with me. And so I really would love for them to at least know what some of them have in their bloodline even. And even those who don't, I would like for them to know that they could pattern their lives after him in a wonderful way.
And we did talk about a little bit about how long it took you to write the book.
Longer than I planned.
How long did you wait until after Matthew passed away? How long was it between him passing to when you knew that you wanted to write this book? And then from there, plus what you took 7 years total, you said, of actually writing the book, the whole process. But
yes.
How many years did you wait until you decided and started writing about this?
The first piece that I wrote is on the back of the book, and it's the first paragraph there. I knew I wanted to write before I ever met him. I had written some poems and just entered them in competition just to see if I could do it or not. And 3 of them were published in 3 different publications. And so folks that knew me as a teacher, fellow teachers and all, a lot of them and family knew that I wanted to write one day. I wanted to write a book, not a poem. And so I told Matthew that one day, and I said, someday I want to write a book. And he said, oh, yeah. He said it real flippantly. Am I going to be in it? And I said, are you kidding? You're the reason for it. So when life was too busy, it was too fun when I had him, and it was short. It was a short-lived life together. But afterwards, when I didn't have much desire to be here anymore and couldn't see any purpose, we didn't have children. It was tough. We wanted very much to have children and couldn't. And so I just, actually, someone had come up to me and said, and it was a sister, and said, you know what, Becky, if you ever had considered writing a book, and I know that you have, this would be the time to do it, because this period of time that you're living through right now, others have lived as well in their own set of circumstances, and it hurts them too, and this could be a help to others. So please don't give up that dream, because this could be the best time for you to do it. So back to your question, about, I would say, not quite a year. I couldn't sleep one night, and I was lying in bed, and all of a sudden I thought of some words that could, maybe, I didn't know how to start the book.
And of course, yeah. I think that a lot of people feel that way, so yeah.
Yeah, I didn't have any idea. And so I thought of this paragraph, and that's all it was. And I knew I'd forget it if I didn't write it down immediately. So I got out of bed, went out to my kitchen table, grabbed a pen and paper, and I wrote that. And I called my sister Amy the next morning, and I said, hey, I wrote the first words that I think will be in my book. And she, when I read them to her, she said, you know what? That would be a great way to start the back cover of your book. And so then it took a while to do anything more, but a huge help to me was a man who was a published author that I met through my job that I went to after teaching, after I lost Matthew, and I taught 23 years at Calvary Academy, a private Christian school. Loved it. That's what I saw myself growing old doing. That's what I wanted more than anything to do. But it didn't quite happen that way. And so when I went to my next job, which was at Boscov's, and I was selling jewelry, and I was told somehow that there was a man there working in the upstairs level who was a best-selling author. And I thought, really? I had never met an author, period.
Yeah.
And so I introduced myself to him, and that summer they used to open up that auditorium upstairs. It's a bargain room. They used to, in the summertime, open it to people in the area who would come and teach a class just for the summer. And he had done that. So I asked off work to take one of his classes, and he was so helpful to me. And when I had introduced myself before I took that class, he would see me upstairs and say, well, did you start your book yet? And I'd say, no. And he'd say, you need to start it. And he did this so many times. And finally, I said to him, Tim, here's the thing. I don't know how. I don't have the slightest idea of where to begin. And he said, well, you've watched good movies, haven't you? And I said, yes. And he said, well, a lot of good movies will start with a very exciting part. And then the rest of the movie goes back and tells the background story that led up to that very exciting part. He said, just treat it like you would a good movie and start with the most exciting thing. So instantly then I knew how, because I knew immediately what that most exciting part would be. So he was a great help to me.
I love that. And I think that it really does come through right in the beginning, because I told you I highlighted in the second paragraph something that really stood out to me. And I find it interesting that we are sitting here talking to one another, and I just celebrated my 44th birthday, and you had just celebrated your 44th birthday only 6 days before you were married.
Yes. And my 44th year was my most happiest in life. And I hope that that's what it ends up being with for you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
We're actually halfway through 2024. Random fun fact. Did you know that we're kind of like almost... We're halfway through the year. So that was just a different thought that came to my mind. But so this first paragraph, do you want me to read this?
If you want
me to read the back. I'm going to read the back. I'm going to read the back.
Right.
So
see the first words to the book then. The first that went on paper.
When, at the age of 43, you have never yet married, the dreams you once possessed of finding your Prince Charming and living happily ever after have a way of fading off into a ridiculous waste of time and energy. Love worth waiting for is one woman's true story, proving that dreams do come true. Once in a while, right in the middle of an ordinary life, love can come along and bring you a fairy tale, even at the age of 43. But how does one begin to comprehend when that husband she has waited for, the one who was all she ever wanted, falls asleep beside her one night, 2.5 years later, and never wakes again? Oh, I'm sorry. Becky Yount recounts for us one of the most beautiful and touching love stories ever lived. She openly shares the unimaginable pain of suddenly losing her young husband without even the chance to say goodbye. She then allows us to feel her struggle as she finally surrenders her brokenness to God and begins the painful road towards healing. Believing that God never wastes our pain, the author has chosen to share her story. It is her sincere desire to remind each of us of God's ever-present love, to prove his ability to answer our most personal prayers, and to encourage those who have found love to cherish it. Oh,
thank you.
Your sister, what she said to you of how so many people can relate to this. I have been reading this book and have had many moments where I've had to stop and really just, it's almost as if I could feel exactly what you were feeling. You can feel, the relationships prior to meeting Matthew, almost this feeling of like, should I have? Like, it's
yes.
like you looked back and almost questioned the convictions that you had and the beliefs that you stood by, and you were very strong in that. And I think that's not an easy thing to do as a woman. And I do believe that it's, would we have this book, right? Would you have had all of that? Think about it. You might not have this book.
Right.
And you wouldn't have had this person that you were supposed to be with.
That's right.
Matthew. And him for you, because it was both of your first marriages.
Right.
Neither one of you had been married, and that's a rare thing now. He was 9 years younger than you, though.
Yes, he
and
was.
I really loved that part of the story.
Did you?
I really liked that. I liked how when you met him you were at Mr. and Mrs. Fry's house.
Yes, on a blind date.
On a blind date. And Mr. Fry had spoken to Matthew before, but he had asked him when they were asking, somehow age had come up. And he said, is she under this age? And he said, no. And he said, is she over 50? And he said, no. And he's like, okay, well, I'd like to meet her. Yes. So there was like an age bracket. So the bracket was it between
18 and 50?
That's right. He's like, is she younger than 18? And he said, no. And he said, is she older than 50? And he said, no. And he said, okay, well, I'd like to meet her then. And so
I had said, Mr. Fry, you have to let him know, because I was aware that he was younger, but I was told it couldn't be too much.
I just thought that was so cute.
That was a bit to swallow. And I had always teased my sister Amy because her husband is 7 years younger. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was rather amusing. And so I
love it.
Yeah, not something that we planned.
Well, and he was surprised by your age, which I always...
He was. I like that.
Yeah, it is a good feeling when people are like, no way. There's no way you're in your 40s. And you're like, yeah.
And I was staring across the table at him, and I'm so glad I was. I loved to see his reaction to that.
Yeah. And you could probably still see that reaction, right?
I can.
Yeah. So chapter 16 is sort of the, chapter where I'm at right now, and this is your wedding day, and you chose the theme, Dreams Do Come True.
Yes.
Your sister had found those invitations for you, right?
It was beautiful. Had a little castle at the top of a winding hill on parchment paper.
Now, there was the restaurant that you went to. That was the night that you got engaged. Wasn't it sort of like a castle sort of looking?
It was Shakespeare's.
Shakespeare's, yeah.
And I forget where it is.
Yeah, I feel like I've heard of that. But it was the first time that you both sort of sat together like alone, separate from other people, right?
Isn't that silly? Yes.
I love that.
But it was special, I'll tell you what. Things that could have been considered silly made it really special.
But that's what I love about your story is so many people, even the student on the last day when you got another bouquet of flowers from Matthew. So really quickly tell the story of the flowers and then the night he came to pick you up for dinner. And was it your sister and brother-in-law that stayed in the car and he came up to the front door?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I love this part. My mom loves this part. But Matthew had, can I go back?
Yeah, of course. Of course.
Okay. My brother-in-law, Aaron, had gone with Matthew to pick up the ring. Matthew's mom went with him to choose it. And then Aaron went back to pick it up later. And then they stopped by to show it to my sister, Amy. My sister, Colleen, and I are very close too, but she lives in Tennessee. So it wasn't as easy to have a lot of these memories with her and her husband, my brother-in-law, Larry. But anyway, so when Amy saw the ring, she said, "Oh, when are you going to give it to her?" And he said, "I don't know. That's the beauty of it. I've already bought it and paid for it, and I've got it in my hot little hand, and I can give it to her whenever the timing is right." And she said, "Oh, no. He told me this part of the story. He said, "Yeah, I thought I got to choose when I gave you the ring, but no, not according to Amy." And she said, "Oh, you don't understand. She's got a really good friend who only comes to our church every 2 years. Her husband's an evangelist, and she sings with them and all. And Mark and Liz Rogers." And she said, Liz has been an encouragement to Becky through the hardest of times. And she would be so thrilled to show off her engagement ring if you give it to her soon enough, and she's coming next week.
Well, there you go. There you go. Oh, I love that.
Oh, it was so neat. I'm not sure he was amused, but he did a great job. He was so romantic.
A true sister-in-law, right?
Our sister.
Yeah. Well,
and,
yes. Yeah.
Oh, became his sister-in-law.
Yes.
So he, this is cute because Matthew kept journals, and they were very private. And he didn't like the thoughts of me reading them at first, but eventually into marriage a little bit. I had asked him, I said, "Would you ever consider maybe sharing a couple of those with me, those entries, like ones that concerned me?" And he said, "I'll think about it." He was a very private individual. And so he did. And now, of course, those are mine, and I can read them from time to time. I haven't yet. This is 10 years later. I haven't yet read all of them. Sometimes it's hard, and I have to set them aside. But anyhow, so where was I going? Because I lost my train of thought. The ring.
So the ring, the flowers leading up to, and then the proposal.
Okay. So the reason I brought up the journals is because in the journal he had written, I'm not sure this was the most romantic proposal, but it's the best I could come up with on short notice.
That's right, because he was under a time crunch. So,
yes.
Wow.
So he had sent to my classroom. I was a teacher of 3rd and 4th graders, a dual classroom, dual grades. And there was a knock on the door one day, and someone delivered a bouquet of 2 red roses and white daisies and some greenery and a sweet little note from Matthew. And it was nice. It was very nice. But the next day, there was an identical bouquet delivered.
I love this story.
The very same, with a sweeter note. Well, I was a little confused by that second one. I didn't put 2 and 2 together. The 3rd day, I started to wonder, because the 3rd day, the same thing happened. And by this time, our school had, well, it's kindergarten through 12th grade. So we had older kids that I used to teach who would stop me in the hallway on their break times and say, Miss Walker, did you get any more flowers from Matthew today? And I would say, yes, I did. And they'd say, could we read the notes? And each note was sweeter than the one before. So then Thursday came, and I got more. Friday came, and this young man in my class named Jacob, as soon as I walked in, I think I got down the hall. And I walked in with him, and he said, flowers again, very perturbed. So anyway.
Spoken like a true kid. Or let's see, he would have been, how old would he have been? Probably 9 or 10 years old.
Probably.
Yeah, 9, spoken like a true 9-year-old. So yeah.
Yeah. And so Matthew had already told me that he was going to take me on a nice day to dress up date on Saturday. So this gave me Monday through Friday, 5 days of identical red roses and white daisy bouquets. So I took them all home, lined them up on my computer desk, and I had asked Matthew, because he was always so incredibly prompt, and I am not. Wish I were.
That actually surprises
me.
me.
I could take that from him. Wish he
Yeah.
could have left that to me, but he didn't. And it doesn't surprise a lot of people. I wish it did. But anyhow, I said to him, because I knew that Amy and Aaron would be in the car. They were coming together. And usually we would meet at a destination on a date.
Okay.
And so I said, would you like to come in and see the flowers? Because you had them delivered, you didn't even see them. And he said, I'll do that. So he came in, and I had the lights off. It was the middle of the day, and it was a bright sunny day, and I've got a very well lit apartment, windows everywhere. So he walked in, he could easily see them, but he seemed a little distracted. So when he came in, I have the most beautiful picture that my sister snapped from the car. He was all dressed up, had a Navy sport coat and khakis on, was wearing a tie, and he had the last bouquet of matching flowers behind his back. And then when he came in, he gave them to me, and he said, you know, I said I would never give a full dozen of red roses to any girl unless I knew I wanted her to be my wife. And so then I took him in. He gave me the bouquets, and we went to the room, the living room where the other flowers were, and I put them there. And that's when he flipped on a light. That's why I mentioned the light.
Yeah.
He turned on a light, and I could tell he was shaking a little bit. And he was 6'5", so big, tall frame. He had played football all through high school, and he got down on his knee, and he proposed. And I remember him putting his hand on his chest, and he said, I would be honored if you would be my wife. And I remember him saying, Becky, would you marry me? And he said it like that. His voice lifted on marry me. Mm-hmm. And I said, are you kidding? I said, I waited for you all of my life, of course. And then I think what he wanted to do with that light, I think he wanted me to be able to hold that. He put the ring on my finger, and I think he wanted me to be able to see it under the light. So I held my hand up under the light, and then I realized my hands was shaking too. But it was perfect. And then he said, so do you want to know where I'm taking you for dinner? And I said, sure. And it was Shakespeare's, that does look like a castle on a golf course, and it has what do you call them, suits of armor standing in the hallway when you first go in and everything.
Yes.
And it was a perfect night.
I love that. You said it was romantic and cozy. Did you use the word cozy? I feel like
I could have.
I did see that in there. Yep. Well, and that was part of it too, like a big, something that I noticed throughout the book, especially in the beginning through your other relationships. And not to give any spoilers away, because the whole point is to get the book, right? And read the book.
If you got the book and read the book.
So we're not going to talk about the previous men, but what you had been through and how something that came up with Matthew was, it wasn't about, just saying, I love you, but really being in love.
Right.
And at one point, and this is another part that I highlighted as well, you said, we admitted to each other that we were both terribly picky, and we knew it. Speaking for myself, I had finally decided that I wanted to stop looking for a man that I could live with. I wanted to find the man that I couldn't live without.
And I have to give credit to a lady who I assume is still a nurse, or maybe even higher for all I know, at Butler Memorial Hospital. But she worked at the time in the cardiac unit, from what I remember. And I believe she was a nurse who cared for my dad during one of his open heart surgeries. But I had just, I was 43 when I met Matthew. And as time went on, and I went out on plenty of dates, and I was set up with folks. Some I only wrote to, some I only emailed, some we only talked on the phone. Many we would go out on a date or two, but I had, what's the best way to say it? Abnormally high standards, maybe. And a lot of men weren't willing to, be real serious with someone if they had to hold to standards that not many did. Mm-hmm. And I had told my mom, I said, the older I got, I just want to meet another lady who's about my age, who hasn't married yet, who's holding on for the right one. And my mom said, well, you need to meet Kathy Sprint. I hope it's okay to use her name. But she had been a homecoming queen at Butler High, from what I remember. I hope I'm remembering accurately.
Okay.
And she and I had gone out to the Texas Roadhouse, and she's the one
we
wanted to be someone's first wife. And so she had told me, she said, I'll tell you what I always come back to. She was very confident, pretty lady. And she said, what I come back to is I want to stop looking for someone I can live with. I want to find the man that I cannot live without. And I said, Kathy, I hope you don't mind if I steal that, because I'm going to.
I'm going to use that.
Yes, it fits what I've been thinking. And I wrote about 3 other relationships I had in here that were meaningful to me. Mm-hmm. They were good men, all 3 of them, good men. And I could see myself with each of them. One of them probably I shouldn't have, but I could. And each one was so different. And when you had first asked me my reason for writing the book, definitely at the top of that list was my 8 nephews and nieces, hands down, absolutely, positively. But I also knew what it felt like to be a young woman who thought she might never marry and was giving up on that hope and that dream. And so those 3 relationships that I wrote about that did not pan out, and you're right, they shouldn't have, or I never would have met Matthew. Mm-hmm. But each one was so different, and I wanted to be an encouragement to other ladies. I mean, so different from each one.
Very different. This episode is brought to you by R.W. McDonald & Sons Incorporated, Robert Stevens Jewelers. Thank you to our sponsors for your support on our first season of the Alter Eagle podcast. Be sure to click the link in bio for your discount for BetterHelp Therapy online. 10% off your first month. And meeting this man, because you were together, you were dating for 6 months when you got engaged, right?
Yes.
And then was it a year after you got married? Because you got married in August. Because you had originally
10 months and a day from our blind date.
Okay, yes, 10 months and a day from your blind date. And he even like had moments where he's like, I'll marry you right now. Like, right?
He was so sweet. Yes. I would love to tell about the blind date.
Yes.
Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
This gives me chills sometimes still when I think about it. But the last relationship had ended 3 years before I met Matthew. And at that point, it was hard. It hurt. But I knew he may have been great for somebody else, but he wasn't who I was meant to be with, and I knew that. Mm-hmm. But I fell in love with him and shouldn't have. And so when it ended, it was pretty awful. And but God knew that 3 years down the line, if I was just patient enough to wait, the man that he had planned for me would be there. Mm-hmm. And I used to think that God was unkind. Many times I would think, I would pray. I would say, God, did you forget about me? Because I love you. I know you as my Savior. I made that decision when I was a 10-year-old girl. I have put some boundaries and stipulations into my life as a teenager when I was old enough to date. I've held to those. And by that time, I had turned 40 during that last relationship. And I thought, I know you love everyone. You care for us. You're our creator. Your son died for us. I know all of that, but it feels like I've been forgotten. Please don't forget me. I know you love me, but I want to be married too. And I don't know that everybody wants to be married. I think most do. I think almost everybody wants to be loved, though. Somehow or other, they want to be loved and deserve to be treated well. And I just couldn't, I couldn't understand why God was having me wait. But after I met Matthew and fell in love with him, and he fell in love with me, and it went in that order. I fell in love with him first, but I wasn't going to say it until he said the words first. And they were awfully special. I was glad I waited for that. But then I understood, because I even said to him one time, and I know I was going to tell about the blind date, but I even said to him, Matthew, I wish I had met you earlier. I wish we had had years before. And he said, no, Becky. He said, it wouldn't have worked. And I said, why wouldn't it have worked? And he said, well, and he didn't bring up the age thing, but the age thing, that wouldn't have worked many years before. Mm-hmm. But he said also, I didn't live my life like I am now. He said, I came to know the Lord as my Savior when I was 20. I was a college student at Edinburgh University. He said, I surrendered my life later to the Lord while I was going to Sylvania Hills Baptist Church in Rochester, PA, under Pastor Michael Bailey. And he said, I live my life differently now. I got rid of a lot of my, I don't know if habits is the right word, maybe not. But he said, I live my life differently. I live my life to please the Lord. I truly want that. And I didn't before. Mm-hmm. He said, you've wanted that for a long time. So you wouldn't have been interested in me back even 10 years ago. Mm. And he said, and I wouldn't have been interested in dating a girl like you. So he said, God knew when the time was right, and this is it. But I have to tell you, okay, I'm going to backtrack again, backpedal to that blind date. So my mom had called me. Mm-hmm. I was I was teaching that day. So middle of the school day, my kids were on break. And so I'm in my classroom and my cell phone rang. And my mom said, I have news for you, but I'm afraid you're going to be upset with me. And I said, all right. What do you have to say, Mom? And she said,
oh, moms, you got to love them.
Oh, I do. Yeah. But she said, well,
I'm setting you up with something.
She said, a blind date has been arranged as long as you agree to it. And I said, a blind date has been arranged. Well, do fill me in. And so.
Do tell.
Yes. So she and my dad had gone to visit Dale and Nancy Fry. Both of them, sadly, are deceased now. But she had just gotten brain cancer not long before, and my parents had heard about it, and they were longtime friends, but had fallen out of touch, didn't see them much anymore. So they wanted to go. My parents wanted to go to their home just to be an encouragement, more than anything. So as they sat there, and our two families had gone to the same church for years and years. Their sons and my sisters and I had gone to the same school, graduated from the same school at Calvary Academy, where I ended up teaching. And so as my parents were sitting there in their living room, my mom just said, because they were going to a different church in a different location then, and she said to Mr. Fry, she said, Dale, do you and Nancy still sing specials? They used to sing duets all the time at our church. Mm-hmm. And she would harmonize so beautifully. And she said, do you still sing? And he said, no. He said, Nancy doesn't remember the words as much as she did. Mm-hmm. But he said, but I still sing in choir next to a young man named Matthew. And to that, now I don't think I mentioned what kind of cancer Nancy had. Maybe I did, but it was brain cancer. Mm-hmm. And so my parents knew that at that point in time, some of her short-term memory was failing. And so this is the part that gives me chills, and it's just so special to me because Nancy perked up, and she looked at my mom and she said, Kathy, every time I see Matthew, I wish he could meet your Becky. And so my mom, who is a hopeless romantic, always has been, still is, mm-hmm. and she's 82 now, and she said, Dale, tell me a little more about this Matthew. And he said, well, I don't know a lot about him. I know that he is faithful to church. He comes alone. He moved to the area for work. He's got a good job with U.S. Steel. He's a supervisor there. And he doesn't have children. What else do I know? That's about it. And she said, all right, well, would you consider maybe talking to Matthew to see if he would consider meeting Becky? And I guess he clammed up and he said, oh, no, I'm no matchmaker. I've never been, not going to start now. 'Cause he was 70 at the time. Mm-hmm. And he said, no, I don't like when people get in my business. I really don't care to be the one who gets into his. So my mom said, and she can do this. She doesn't quit easily. She said, I thought you loved my daughter. And he said, you know that's not fair because you know I do. And she said, then I'm asking you to make a one-time exception. And he said, I will not promise, but I'll consider. Mm-hmm. So it didn't take him long, and mm-hmm. he asked Matthew if he would consider meeting me, and that's when, as you said earlier, mm-hmm. He was supposed to let Matthew know that there was an age difference.
There's an age difference, but he gave him a...
between 18 and 50.
Between 18 and 50, which I thought was cute. And that was Matthew. Well, is she younger than 18? No. Mm-hmm. Is she older than 50? No. Okay, well, I'd like to meet her then. Yep. Were there two questions? Or did he have two questions for you when you met? No, that was it, right? Those were the two questions.
So too. I think that was it.
Yeah. And then even then, after the first time you met, he did want to, he talked to someone about that, didn't he?
About the age difference, yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, because Mr. Fry asked, we had, I think our date lasted a couple hours at least, and I left first, and Mr. Fry is the one who walked me out to the car, and he said, Becky, what did you think? And I said, well, this is the kind of guy I would really be interested in getting to know. Mm-hmm. And he said, can I give him your number? And I said, you know what? The age difference is a lot to swallow. So I said, how about if he wants it, fine. If he doesn't, I'm okay with that because I get it. Mm-hmm. And so when he mentioned this to Matthew later before he left, Matthew said, just give me a little bit of time. I need to think about this. And honestly, he said, I'd like to pray about it and see if it's a big deal to God or not. And so he talked to a couple other people, including his grandma, Quisenberry. Mm-hmm. And he said, he told her about the age difference. And she said, well, Matthew, you're pretty particular about a lot, specifically about God. and your beliefs about the Bible. So do you think this girl feels the same way you do about those things? And he said, Grandma, I really do. And she said, then maybe that's what should matter more than the age.
Uh-huh.
So that helped him
Those
decide.
grandmas, I tell you what, they're smart grandmas.
They are
They
smart.
know.
She was pretty wonderful. Yeah.
I love though how you, because that was something I had written down that I noticed. And the flowers. So something that you still have to as well is Matthew's little green New Testament book.
Yes. Can I tell you his testimony? Is that okay?
Of course.
It is the most, well, to me, is the most beautiful testimony I had heard, I ever remember hearing. Matthew was an Edinburgh college student, I had already mentioned. And I already mentioned he was a big guy, big football player, and he had an intimidating presence. But he was a gentle giant, truly, truly a gentle giant. But he didn't look like that. Mm. And so he said that he called them missionaries. There was a group of Gideon Bible missionaries, he called them, the folks that put the Bibles in the motel rooms, if they still do that, and who even pass out the little New Testaments they used to even come to our school to deliver those to a certain age group.
Okay.
Excuse me. And he said this was his first year of college. I believe he was 20. I think it was his first year of college. But anyway, he was walking across campus, and he saw this group, and they had these little green New Testaments, and they were ready to pass them out. And he said he could see what was going on, and he was so not in the mood for that. And so he said he rerouted to the other side of the campus street where he was. And he said he avoided all eye contact, putting his head down just a little bit. And he said that before he knew it, there was an older gentleman who was one of that group who came and stopped him in front of him, stood in front of him with a little green New Testament. And he got Matthew to look up, and he said, young man, I understand that you're busy. I know you have a lot to do. But he said, I would like you to take this little New Testament. It's only a part of the Bible, and I would like you to read it when you get a chance. Because he said some people don't realize, a lot of people don't realize you really can know that you're on your way to heaven. It's not something you just hope for or maybe work to be good enough to go to, but you can know. The Bible tells us. So Matthew politely took it, and the last thing the man said, I guess, was he said, inside the back cover, they've taken just a few verses and they've put them in the back, the verses that specifically tell you what you need to do in order to be sure of heaven one day. So Matthew took it, and what that man, I wish that man could know the difference that one little New Testament and the boldness of that older gentleman, I don't know how old he was, but Matthew considered him older, what that decision made in the life of the man who would become my husband, therefore my life, and Matthew's eternity. But what the man didn't know, never could have known, is that Matthew would become an archivist. So he read everything that he could get his hands on, including that little Bible. And this was in a journal entry also of his. He read it in, I believe it was 3 days, flat from cover to cover. Remember, it's not a whole Bible, it's just a little tiny part of it.
Yeah.
And so when he read that, he said that he had gone to a fraternity meeting shortly after, and he had that with him. So after the meeting was over, it was more a business meeting, he said, but it was housed in the campus library. And he said that after the meeting was over, he wasn't in the mood to socialize. He didn't want to go back to his dorm room. So he decided to just find a floor of the library where nobody was. And he got in the elevator and went up a few floors and found, honestly, surrounded by books. I know this because after our marriage, it was the first year after we had gone up to, we were in Erie for a volleyball tournament for my school. And we were close enough to Edinburgh that he took me there. And I said, I want to see that library where you accepted the Lord as your Savior, because that's what ended up happening there. And so he took me, and he took me up to that level where he was. and books galore, you know, shelves and shelves of books. And
Wow.
and along the windows were some individual chairs. And he said it was in one of those chairs by the window. I sat down. He said nobody was around. And he said, I just wanted to look inside the back cover of that little New Testament again. I wanted to read those verses again. And he said, Becky, it just told me that, number one, to know you're on your way to heaven, you have to know you're a sinner. And he said, I'm a college student, you know. I'm a 20-year-old guy. He said, nobody had to tell me that. I knew I was a sinner. And he said, the second thing was you had to know that Jesus Christ died on a cross for you. And he said, I knew that. He said, my parents, you know, had me in church. He said, I went to a church where they talked about that. And he said, so I knew Jesus died for me. He said, then after that, it gave verses again that said that there had to be a time and a place where you as an individual told the Lord you were sorry for your sins, you knew he died for you, and you wanted him to forgive those sins. Not a memorized prayer. It was just a matter of your heart. It was a conversation between you personally and God, nobody else. And it had to be a real decision, as real as it had to be something that you would remember. It didn't say this in the back of the book, but I've heard it explained before.
Yeah.
And Matthew, agreed with us that it has to be as memorable an occasion when you ask Christ into your heart as, say, a high school graduation that you would look back to and remember that.
Yes.
Or a wedding day.
That moment.
Or a birth of a child. It is a genuine decision that made a difference in your life. And he said, that's what I knew I had never done. And he said, I figured, well, this is the time.
Wow.
So he bowed his head and he asked God to forgive his sins and to come into his heart and be his savior. So he was, some people call it being born again. He was saved that day. That's what I usually say. But I was 10 when I made that decision, but he had a whole set of different life experiences than I did when he made it. And he would, it was so neat. I loved how much he loved God, because I needed that. That's what I was waiting for. Somebody that loved the Lord like I did. And he did. And anyway, that was pretty special.
Well, it was special for you to also go visit that place with him, like after you were
showed me
married.
that.
And that was a special place, because had he not had that experience, right?
Right.
Then again, this would be an entirely different book.
That's right.
And I think that's what people need to remember with the beginning of the book and all of the love stories that you had before that, right? And you did.
Yes.
You did. And how those all ended and how you healed through all those. And I remember the last one, and was it your sister that told you, or was it your mom that told you that you had to, that you had given your love to this person, right? That you gave your love, but that you needed to take it back.
That was my former pastor who had retired. He is, I still see him every church service, Pastor Wayne Dillabaugh. And he had told me that he had been my pastor from the time I was 12 years old until 30-something.
Okay.
And he knew me. He was my boss at one point when I taught in the school before our current pastor and administrator had taken over, Pastor Ward. And he stopped me in the hall one day, and he just knew me enough to say, Becky, you're not doing well, are you? And I said, no. And he knew something. He knew enough about that being a very hard breakup for me, and one that maybe I shouldn't have even gotten to that point, but it had. And he said, you know, you chose to give your heart to him, not Matthew, of course, but Matthew hadn't come around yet. But he said, if you chose to give that your heart to him, he said, if you think about it, if there is still a man out there that God wants to be your husband, the one you've held out for all these years, doesn't that man deserve all of your heart, not just what's left now? He said, you might very well need to just ask God to give you your heart back in its entirety so you can give it away to the man that you ought to give it away to.
Wow.
And I needed to hear that.
This pastor at this moment in your life, that was what you needed.
Yes.
And not that you wouldn't have gotten that from another pastor.
That's
but
right.
It was such a important message for you to receive, and just the overlying theme here of your faith and God and everything that you believed in and everything that you stood for, that you stand for, right? You. And how you just knew, you're like, no, I'm going to stand true to all these things because Matthew, and we got about 6 minutes left. We've talked for almost 55 minutes. Wow. Isn't that wild?
Yes.
How quickly it goes. But something that I really would love to hear is that Matthew was your first kiss.
Yes, he was.
He was everything. He was something that you had always waited for, and even the hug. And I want you to share that story of the hug, and then anything else you might want to share. But we want to try to keep it within 5 to 6 minutes if we can, because I don't want to cut anything out.
Okay, I'll do my best.
So, yeah. All
right. So Matthew had not dated like I had. And of course I knew that. And so I told him everything before we went on a second date. We had talked for a while on the phone and had covered a lot of territory. And every time we'd come up to a potential deal-breaking conversation, we'd come out on the same page. And I remember thinking, oh, my word, this is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And, excuse me. So anyhow, he said that he would be willing to date this way if it meant getting to know me better. And he said he was in this for the long haul. He had an end goal in sight. He wasn't dating just to date. I heard that many times. And I wasn't either. So anyway, we were, the part that you had asked to hear about the hug. So we had talked about holding hands. I never had, and not with anyone else either. So I hadn't kissed. I was waiting for my wedding day, but we had never discussed a hug. And we were real close to marriage because it was just a 4-month engagement period. By the way, he said he had always planned to date a person for about a year or two. And then I forget which it was. I think it was a couple. And then be engaged for a year. And then he proposed to me in 6 months. And I had asked later what the difference was. And he said, oh, who are we kidding? He said, we know God had us meet each other for this reason. So why wait? He said, it's not the same as any other relationship I ever had. He said, we know this is meant to be. Let's just do it. And so anyway, we were already engaged. We had been at my parents' house one night and we left. He had parked, he and I both had our cars out there and it was under the moonlight. You know, it's dark outside and we were saying goodbye. And I said, Matthew, would you there's only one thing I want. Would you just give me a hug? And I realized we had never talked about that. And he said pretty quickly, no. And my jaw, I swear it dropped and I had to pick it up. And I said, what? And he said, no. He said, Becky, we've made it this close to our wedding day. And he said, remember, I never dated like this with anybody else. And he said, I don't know what it's like for a girl, but I know for a guy, if you love a girl, it changes things when you hug them. And he said, there's no need to make things any harder. And then he got this mischievous look, which I saw many times. And he said, but I'll tell you what, when we get married, we are making up for this. And he did. He sure did. He was very affectionate, very loving.
I love that. And that's in the book too. I mean, I know you talk about going to see family, and any chance he had, if you were in the kitchen, to come up and hug you. And so
He did.
you were married. So you bought your house 6 months before he died.
Right. And even that's one thing I want to be sure to mention. When I hated losing him. That's not even an accurate statement. It was so beyond that. I've never had anything hurt that bad in life. I didn't think anything could hurt that bad. At 3 years, I was still crying most every single solitary day. I kid you not. I even documented that. I wrote it down because I was concerned that I wasn't ever going to heal. But the hardest part without him is that I don't belong to anybody now. I don't have children that belong to me or that I belong to. My husband's not here anymore, but I do belong to God, and that's the hope that I want to give, because I'm not the only one who's lost a husband. I have encountered so many folks that have, and men who've lost wives that they truly, truly adored. But when we have the Lord in our heart, we still belong to someone. We belong to him. And so no matter how lonely I get from time to time, I know he's with me all the time. And the house situation, you would ask me, we had bought our house 6 months before Matthew passed. It's a duplex. I had rented it before, and then he wanted to move in there when we married, as opposed to where he had been living in an apartment building in Grove City. So we moved into my place. Later, it became available to buy. Interest rates were great at the time, and so ours went up for sale, and we bought it. And I remember even wondering about that, because I had a 30-year mortgage to, I'm going to be paying on a mortgage for a while.
Yeah.
But it was a duplex, as I said already. So it provided rental income. I've now fully renovated my upstairs apartment. I'm so proud of it. But God did that. He allowed Matthew to be the one who wanted to buy that place, because I kind of fought him on it a little bit. But God knew that he was going to take Matthew to heaven. And I love that I know that's where he is. All scripture points that way. From what Matthew told me about his salvation testimony, I have every confidence, 100%, that that's where he is, and that I'll join him one day. But as far as my time here, God used Matthew to make the decision to buy that house, where I wouldn't have to sell the house afterwards. I could use it as a rental income to help me have a home of my own and help me into my older years when that time comes. But God takes care of me.
I was just going to say, it's almost as if he's still taking care of you.
Yes.
And yeah, you're still being taken care of.
Well, you want to know a little more about that? And I'm not sure this should be on a podcast, if it should or shouldn't. But Matthew left me life insurance. I've chosen to invest that because I was only 46 when I was widowed. And those investments, I have a fabulous financial advisor. Thank you, Jay Schaefer. And he, with my investments, the dividends from those investments help me every month. They're put straight into my checking account to help me afford my mortgage. So it does kind of feel like Matthew is still helping to provide through the Lord.
I 100% believe that there is this, that he's now your guardian angel. That I do. I believe that. I do believe that there's still a part of them that does sort of watch over us, right?
I believe he watches.
And, well, I just want to say thank you. And truly what I want to say is to anyone who's listening is that you should read the book. You can come here, and you usually have some books here, don't you?
I do, thanks to our president and publisher, Ron Vodnecker. He told me I can, when he retired, well, before that, he's the one who bought the first copy and put it at the end of the credenza behind my desk. And he said, keep this here. It needs to be advertised. He said, find a nice thing to put it on. So I got an easel. But he said that I had, even after he retired, he said, you have permission to hang on to those. And if anybody asks about them, you may buy. You may sell them, rather.
And you can, I don't know if you can see behind her, is she had
Probably moved in front of it.
She just recently had the cover of the book professionally framed.
By
so
our own Lori Yates, who works upstairs.
Yeah, Lori Yates upstairs did that for us, who works in composing.
Yeah.
She's our composing, the composing foreman. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So, Love Worth Waiting For. And it's also available. Is this available on Amazon?
Yes, other places as well.
Okay.
It's in catalogs for any. My publisher is Christian Faith Publishing through Meadville, PA, out of Meadville, PA.
Okay. I'll put their information in the caption.
Oh,
and your email as well.
Thank you. And I want to mention one more thing, because I don't think I mentioned my sister Colleen by name, but I am so grateful for my family, for my mom, for my dad who prayed for me to meet a man like Matthew. This book tells about the passing of my father also, which was 6 months later.
Will you just do me a favor? Move a little closer to the mic.
Oh,
Sorry. That's
Thank
okay.
you. But anyhow, that was one of the reasons that it took so long to write the book, because I was told I needed to add some more to it. And one of the things was the loss of my dad. But my dad prayed for so many years that I would meet a man like Matthew. And he got to meet him. He got to walk me down the aisle to give me away to Matthew. And but my sisters, my sister Amy, my sister Colleen.
Yeah, there's you and your dad, right? Yeah.
I'm so grateful for my brothers-in-law, Larry and Aaron, and for so many reasons. I know there's no more time to talk, but for so many people in my life, so many friends, my pastors, plural, my current and my former pastor, my nieces and my nephews, even the ones I don't get to see too much anymore, my mother-in-law, my father-in-law. They were all a part of this love story and continue to be a part of my life.
Yes.
Thank you for the opportunity, Laura.
Oh, you're welcome. I feel like you got to say what you want to say, but is there anything else that you'd want to say?
I don't think so. Nothing's coming to mind right now.
Okay. That's okay. I kind of put you on the spot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything's, I can edit it so we can.
Let me look at this then. I didn't explain this.
Oh, the breakdown of the book. Yeah. Or
do I need to?
I don't know. I think it was a total of 10 years or 7 years for the book, start to finish. So, I can even, 4 years to think it was done, 1 year to add more, 1 year to decide how to get it published, and another year to go through the publication process. So,
right. Something I didn't get to talk about at all, but there's much of it in the book, is the fun we had as a married couple. He didn't consider himself to be funny. He had a very dry wit, but it cracked me up. And he would tease me all the time, but I like to tease too. So I would tease right back.
Yep.
And there are a whole lot. That's probably my favorite part of the book, is the fun that we had together, and the humor, and his little wisecracks and comments, and there's a lot of that.
I love that
in there, but he made life fun. We laughed almost every single day, and I will mention that one friend that I had walked with, we would walk for exercise at school, a fellow teacher, and Lisa and I would walk, and she would often ask me, "So how are things going with your new marriage?" And I would say, I swear we laugh every single day. And she said, "Oh." And I said, "Well, you and your husband are happy too. You probably do the same." And she said, "No, Becky, I think that's something that you and Matthew share that's very special." She said, "Yes, we do have a very happy marriage, my husband and I." But she said, "We don't laugh every day. We don't make each other laugh every day." And that was one of the most fun parts of marriage.
Yeah, very special too.
Yeah.
I think that is very special. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And it's just, it really is. It's it's taken me, I've had to stop, you know, because
what helped me the most was just let me talk about him. Use his name. Don't be afraid to use his name. Because a lot of people were afraid of that too. They thought that would hurt. And I said, no, he existed. He was very much a part of my life, the best years of my whole existence. I don't want to forget him. I want to know what you remember about him. I want to tell you my favorite memories of him. And then what we tend to do is we repeat those stories so many times.
So many times.
And I found that is typical of grief, to repeat the same stories that you love.
Yeah.
But just to be heard, just to have somebody be there and listen. That's sometimes more valuable, I think, than laboring over trying to say the right thing. You don't have to.
Yes. And that's just it. That's just it. Don't overthink it. Right?
Right.
Have you ever heard the acronym? And I don't know if it's the nicest acronym, but KISS, keep it simple, stupid.
Oh, yeah.
It's almost as if like we would say that a lot in theater, like, or improv when we were doing something. It's like, just keep it simple, just whatever comes to your mind. But when it does come to grief, a lot of times people would say, oh, I know how you feel. And it's like,
oh, that hurts. That makes you angry.
That provokes something inside of you where like,
no, you don't know how I feel.
No, actually you don't. And you don't have to. Like, that's
right.
not what this is about.
It's okay.
It's not it's okay. It's okay. I had shared this with you too, but I had a friend who had lost her father, and we were friends already, but we definitely did sort of get a little bit closer, right? Because I felt as if this was someone who's been there, right? And has experienced exactly what I'm experiencing, like losing a parent, not only that, but her dad. Who she was really close to, and I was very close to my dad. And being able to just say, is it normal for me to be feeling this way? Is it normal for me to like not want to talk to anybody and to just be left alone? And feel as if, you know, when people ask me like what I want, it just makes me mad because I'm like, well, I don't want this to be my life. But you can't do anything about that. So
right.
And what you're going to try to do in turn is be like, eventually it'll be okay. It's like, no, I don't think that we ever stop grieving people, especially when you feel that deeply for them.
I'm glad you said that, because I don't either. And I think when people tell you things will get better with time, I think they say that because they want to say something helpful. And I think, again, now being 10 years into this, I miss Matthew every day. I love him as I did before. But I think what we do is we learn to adjust. That's what we do. And if you had asked if there was anything I really wanted to say that maybe I hadn't, and this is one of those things. This was said to me by a lady who worked, and I believe still does, at Bortmas Florist. And there were two ladies that my mom wanted me to talk to that were both widowed, and they had done 2.5 years before Matthew's passing. The one lady had done our wedding flowers, and then I was to meet with her to do his funeral flowers. But she was widowed, and so my mom wanted them to give any input that they could. One's first name is Karen, and one's first name is Susan. I can tell you that much. But she had me talk to both of them, and one of them I don't remember who to give the credit to, but one of them said, oops, hang on. This could have been in a book I read, Laura.
Okay.
So scratch that part.
Okay.
But anyhow, the one lady did tell me, she asked me, she said, does it feel like there's a hole in your heart with blades that keep revolving and just, it's always painful? And I said, yes. And she said, that's what grief feels like when you really, really loved someone. And she said, what will happen through time is that the sharp blades, the sharp points on the blades will smooth out. That's what happens. It's not that it stops hurting. It just won't be so intense forever. But the other part that I had heard that I recall so many times, because it just... It's big. It's kind of deep. And I think this was read in a book. I had a lot of books on grief sent to me to be a help, but
I'm sure you did.
But this author had said, when you lose someone who is incredibly close to you, it's almost like having a leg amputated, because you never, no matter how much therapy, physical therapy you have to learn to walk again, you're never going to walk exactly as you did before. Even if you get a prosthetic, you're still not going to walk exactly as you did once. So the goal in life will be, because you lost someone that big to you, the goal in life will be to one day walk with as little a limp as possible. And that's what I try to do. That's my goal. That's my goal for life, to walk with as little a limp as possible, and to, through this book, honestly, to give hope to others that there's still good in life. There's still a sun that shines. There's still a God that loves and a God that cares. And there's still a future if we're granted air to breathe. There's still a future we get to live as long as we're here. We need to make it good. We need to take advantage of our time and those in life that we love, and make sure that they know they're loved. Make sure that they know we love them. I've been told by a lot of readers that that it's fast moving. I did short chapters for a reason, because I get overwhelmed with big, thick books, and they really are short, but I've been told that it makes you want to go on to the next one. And I've been told by multiple people that of course, there are parts that will make you cry, but there are many parts that make you smile, many parts that warm your heart, and some that make you laugh, and that makes me happy. And I also love, love, love that there are men who have read this book, because this is not a romance novel. There is romance in it, but it's not a romance novel, and it is deliberately, carefully done enough for teenagers to read, thinking of my nephews and nieces, the youngest of them especially, and none of them had a significant other in their life when I wrote this, so I wanted it to be carefully worded, and anyway, I wanted men to be able to read it and enjoy it. And I've been told just the other day, actually, by someone who works here, that it made my day, that he had read it right before his own retirement coming up here. So I appreciate that. But it's not heavy reading, all of it, some, but not all. But I would appreciate you taking time to read it on your own. And thank you for this time that I got to talk about my book.
You're welcome. You're welcome. It was an honor. Thank you so much.
To me too. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for tuning in to Alter Eagle. Join me every Monday for a new episode, and be sure to click subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Follow us on Instagram at Alter Eagle Podcast. Until next time, stay safe, stay hopeful, stay kind.